Hello, everyone. Just a quick preface to let you all know that this installment of the podcast is an excerpt from episode 64 of The Van Cave. Since Matt passed away, I've been going back through the old episodes and found this one. And since you guys liked my top 5 biker movies of all time podcast pretty well, I thought I would share this excerpt of me talking about American International Pictures and all of the B-quality motorcycle and hot rod movies that they did in the 1950s. It's a pretty interesting conversation. At least I thought so, and I hope you will think so too. You guys enjoy.
From deep in the heart of West Texas, it's the Tim Kreitz Adventures Podcast. Talking motorcycles, music, beer brewing, pop culture, adventure, and all points in between. Now, here's your host, Tim Kreitz.
Throw it down, Tim.
My current wormhole is with not necessarily a single film, but with a production company. American International Pictures, AIP. Now, I guarantee you have seen a bunch of their movies, especially with us being into bad movies as much as we are. They made 500 movies, everything from biker movies in the 60s to blaxploitation movies. Foxy Brown, for example, is one of the movies they made.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so a lot of these types of movies, Hell's Angels 69 and The Glory Stompers and The Wild Angels. But before all of the counterculture movies that they made and all of the blaxploitation movies, they started off in the mid-50s making what are now just called hot rod movies or drag strip movies. And they centered around the mid-50s post-World War II hot rod and motorcycle movements that were happening just during that time period.
So these are like the first movies you see at a double feature drive-in.
All of the AIP movies, for the majority of their run as a company, were packaged as double features.
Gotcha.
Yes, that is correct. So you would see, for example, Hot Rod Gang, which literally is the name of one of the movies, and they all had titles like this. Hot Rod Gang would be alongside Drag Strip Girl, okay, and it would be a double feature. And these movies, the runtime to help keep them cheap and low budget was usually around an hour and 5 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes. So you could do a double feature, and it was 2.5 hours long because the guy Sam Arkoff, who was kind of the brainchild behind the production company, says, well, we knew that people wouldn't pay full price to see one of these pictures, but they would definitely pay full price if they thought they were getting 2 movies for the price of one. What they ended up doing is they changed the face of cinema and American pop culture in the process. One of the early theories that they made these movies around was that all of our movies have got to be geared toward 19-year-old boys, because a younger kid will always watch what an older kid is watching, and a guy's girlfriend will always watch what the guy is watching, but a guy won't always watch what his girlfriend watches, and a guy that's about 19 won't watch like the Disney movies that were being pushed at the time that the younger kids wanted to watch. So they figured that their Golden Goose was focusing on movies that appealed to 19-year-old boys, and all of these movies do. From the monster movies that they made, some of the most classic and ridiculous monster movies you've ever seen from the 50s. They American International Pictures made movies in all of those teen genres. Everything from beach movies, Beach Blanket Bingo,
was that them?
Yeah, that was them.
Okay.
Yeah, Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. Moondog. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do is, we could sit here and just talk for hours just about the American International Pictures Library, but the ones that really are fascinating me right now that I'm digging into are these early to mid 50s hot rod and motorcycle movies, these drag strip movies. And the reason why is partly to do just with what's happening to us culturally, I think. Mm-hmm. There is this huge stark contrast between where we are culturally right now and what we consider risque and what we consider social justice and what we consider to be politically correct, what we consider to be, I mean, obviously we're all at odds on all that stuff right now, and I'm not offering opinions one way or another, but these were supposed to be rebellious movies at the time. These were the movies of rebellion. And these kids were so tame in their rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
One of the big things was that they were having a lot of problems with motorcycle crashes and hot rod crashes. And back then you'd buy a 32 Ford that was 20 years old, and you'd pay $50 for it, and you'd put $100 into it, and you had a hot rod. Strip all the fenders off of it, etc. We've all seen these hot rods. They endure. That classic hot rod design, it endures to this day. But the premise of these movies has to do with one guy wants to do right. He wants to form a car club or a motorcycle club and have it sanctioned by the AMA, and by golly, we're going to do this right. We're not going to race on the streets. We're not going to be menaces to society, but there's all this rebellion going on around him and his group who's trying to make this positive change of all these ne'er-do-wells. And in the actions of the ne'er-do-wells is where the action of the movie comes from. So they're building these movies on the premise this movie's about a guy who's trying to straighten out the crazy hot rod scene that's out of control, but at the same time they're exploiting the gratuitous nature, in quotation marks, of the hot rod scene. So they were using it as an excuse to show all this craziness and mayhem. And I just thought to myself, man, we've come a long way since Mayberry, and Mayberry had come a long way since those movies. And I've just been fascinated by what was considered rebellion and what is considered rebellion today by comparison. And it's just a societal juxtaposition that I'm making with these movies, but I've become fascinated with them just from a pop cultural standpoint. And so one of them is called, as I said, one of them is called Motorcycle Gang. And oddly, they feature heroines. Two of these movies feature heroines. One's a chick who rides motorcycles. One's a chick who has a hot rod. And oddly enough, they're very believable in their role. And I sat and thought about how Hollywood right now is bound and determined that all heroes in all movies are going to be female.
Right.
Everything is feminist social justice.
It has to be perfectly diverse.
Yeah, it has to be perfectly diverse. It has to be perfectly power equal. And as a result, the idea of what a believable hero is or a believable protagonist, I believe, has been perverted. And you can look at it, I don't want to get too political, but you can look at the failure of a lot of mainstream movies that have come out in the past few years that have tried to thrust a female into the hero role, and it's not believable.
We were talking about this right before you got here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the movie fails for that and a variety of other reasons. And one of the things that these movies actually got right, for all their cheapness and crappy storylines and ridiculous premises, is that they knew how to put a female protagonist in a lead role, and she was believable, somewhat believable in
Tina
that
Turner.
role.
Yeah, Tina Turner's Mad Max Tina Turner versus the Fury Road.
Yeah,
heroine.
Fury Road. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Thunderdome. You know, that's a good way to look at it. So another one that is older than, what's happening modernly, but certainly a lot younger than those movies, is something like Alien.
Yeah.
I saw Alien, when I was 9 years old on HBO late at night, or 10 years old, staying up all night in the summer. And I totally believed Sigourney Weaver in that role. She was feminine, but she was totally believable. She wasn't this larger-than-life, ridiculously strong character with no weaknesses and no femininity. And that's one of the reasons I think that movie endures. Of course, Ridley Scott's a genius in his own right, but she was the completely believable heroine. And I thought to myself, here is a movie that probably cost $10,000 to make, and they probably shot it in 5 days. And there are these female characters in these cheesy movies with half-ass acting that are more believable and more compelling in some ways than what Hollywood is churning out today.
You can argue, too, that movies of that time were pushing a social agenda
They were, definitely.
The same way they were here, but it's still more representative of reality. What makes a female heroine or male, that's you don't have the kind of androgynous vampire.
Yeah. And that was part of the thing, was that they were speaking the language with these early AIP movies, especially the drag strip movies in particular. They were speaking the language of the teenagers of the time. And just the language in the movies, I've done a lot of reading and research, caused a cultural upheaval. They were like, yeah, what's happening, Daddy-O? And this cat is...
This ain't my bag, man.
This ain't my bag. This cat is square, man. You know, all the beatnik, all the beatnik talk of the 50s, that language was berated by the press during the time. But one of the reasons that teenage kids gravitated to those movies was simply because of that aspect of it. That dynamic was there. The characters were believable. The characters spoke their language and accurately reflected what was happening in society. And I think one of the things Hollywood's doing right now is they're trying to show a perverted idea of the way they wish society was going, and it's not going that way, and that's why so many of these movies are failing. Anyway, that's kind of a bit of a tangent, but I've had a lot of time on my hands with the pandemic, and both businesses have been bad, and I've just ended up with more time to watch movies, and I'm always interested in film. You guys know me from a film study standpoint more than anything else, and a pop culture standpoint, and I'm just really digging on these American international pictures.
That's cool.
Films
and they're
50s.
Shit. And they're
seen crap. They're total crap.
Wasn't it Beach Blanket Bingo that there was the huge controversy over Annette Funicello's bathing suit?
Yeah, about her belly button. Yeah,
it was a belly button.
So here's the deal. One of the owners of AIP, his name was Sam Arkoff. He figured out they had been trying to get Annette Funicello in their pictures for years, but she had been under contract with Disney forever, and Walt Disney loved her like a daughter, apparently. So they finally figured out that she was available to do pictures, and they were going to do these beach party movies. And Sam said that he got a call from Walt, a very angry, an irate Walt Disney. And Walt said, "What are you doing to my little girl in these pictures?" And he said, "Look, Walt, you're old-fashioned." He said, "We're not doing anything bad to her in these movies. She's 19, almost 20-year-old girl now. She's not a little... She's not a 10-year-old who lost her puppy. We're just trying to show her how she is as a grown woman now." And Walt just couldn't understand it. They went back and forth on all of this, and I'm sure Walt was a very powerful man in his own right and had probably issued some threats about, "I'll figure out a way to ruin your movie studio." But Arkoff was able to talk him down from the ledge and talk reason with him. And finally, Walt agreed, okay, you can put her in these movies, but under no circumstances does she wear a bikini, and under no circumstances are you to show her belly button.
Dirty girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Belly buttons were a thing. Mm-hmm. Like, that's another thing about this period of filmmaking and of pop culture and American culture.
Thing?
Well, you couldn't show a chick's belly button without controversy back then.
Yeah. Well, and this goes all the way into the 60s in mainstream film. We're not talking off the deep end in the independent stuff. Mm-hmm. Go watch A Guide for the Married Man.
Okay.
Walter Matthau. Yeah. There's more TNA in that movie.
It surprised me how much.
Yeah. It was kind of a shocker to me, and it was very mainstream. Obviously, Walter Matthau and the guy that played the old man, Burt Peterson in Mad Men. I feel bad. I can't think of his name. A lot of famous people, but the camera angles and the jiggling and the puppies fighting under a sheet and all that. There's no nudity in it.
It's suggested.
Right. Yeah. Roger Corman, who did a bunch of AIP's pictures, who directed a bunch of their pictures. Roger Corman did the Glory Stompers. He did Wild Angels. I think he did Hell's Angels 69, and he did this film called The Trip, which you guys may or may not have heard of, but it's pre-Easy Rider. All these movies are just a year or two before Easy Rider, and they've got Dennis Hopper. And why am I drawing a blank on Peter Fonda? Why did I do that?
I was thinking Nicholson.
Because you're sitting close to me, dude. I'm a vacuum of memory right now.
Anyway, the very first AIP picture to show nudity was The Trip, and it's very tame, and even the way it's shot, the nude scenes are supposed to take place during LSD sequences, dream or trip sequences in the movie. And you barely see anything. It was hugely controversial at the time. And Roger Corman, I saw an interview with him where he was talking about it. He said, I only used the nude footage during those hallucination sequences. And he said, boy, we thought we were pushing the envelope, and we took a lot of heat for that. He said, but if you look at that compared to today, it almost doesn't count as a nude scene.
Yeah, it's like a commercial, like a non-primetime commercial.
Yep. But AIP helped to usher in counterculture films.
So they're not still doing anything.
No.
Do you know what their kind of operating years were?
Yeah, their operating years were, I believe, 1954 to 1980.
Okay.
Arkoff sold it. His partner died several years before, and he sold the movie studio, I believe, in 1980. And his last film that he did with the studio was in 78. So they made films from 54 to 80s, 500 and something movies. And you've heard of most of them. Mm-hmm. So it's an incredible library to go through. And the business model by which, and I don't know if he realized this was going to happen at the time, but the business model by which they made all these movies became this method for encapsulating American culture. Really, no other low-budget movie studio did that. You had big multi-million-dollar films that did a really good job of capturing American popular culture and social culture from decade to decade, but not every other movie with these movies that were shot in 5 days or 2 weeks or whatever. And there's hundreds of them that you can go through. Very interesting film study. And of course, there's the added bonus that Roger Corman did a lot of them and similar directors. So for the limited budget and the limited equipment that they were using, you can see those directors' visions. Like, you can really get some good ideas on technique and that sort of thing by watching the movie. So that's the wormhole that I'm in right now. So everybody just go check out American International Pictures. There are a couple of good documentaries on American International Pictures you can watch. And of course, most of the movies they're on Amazon, they're on Netflix, they're on YouTube, they're all over the place. So
I'll check
that's my contribution.
I'm into that.
Yeah, that's my contribution for the evening.
That's a good one.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. See you next time.